Alright guys, so today we're going to be talking about YCS Vegas, the 3v3 YCS that just happened this past weekend, sort of what happened at the event and what the resulting meta trends are. From the tournament, it is of course the first premier event sort of after the new ban list in the new format, so a lot of interesting things happened, and I just want to talk about sort of the biggest things that happened in the event and summarize it, and then more importantly how to deal with those going forward and what cards might trend upwards past what trended this last weekend. So before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know Discord link down below along with all of our other social media links. Also, I'm trying to hit 14,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy this Yu-Gi-Oh content, you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel. Also, just letting everyone know who might want to know, I will be attending the Shreveport Regional this weekend, so if you do see me, feel free to say hi. It's always a pleasure to talk to anyone who wants to talk to me. So yep, with all that being said, let's talk about YCS Vegas. Alright, so one of the bigger things to note about this event is of course what managed to do well and go into top cut. Kashtira was the most represented strategy, which is no surprise, I don't think. I think most people expected Kashtira to really be the predominant meta threat. Another big thing is the other two decks, which were also sort of predicted, were Branded and Labyrinth. Now, not everyone was expecting Labyrinth, but a large portion of the community knew Labyrinth was going to be one of the better decks at this tournament. We also had like some Sprite variants do okay, like a Sword Soul variant in there. There were a few other decks, but mostly the story of the event was Kashtira, Labyrinth, and Branded. Now, Kashtira, a full team of Kashtira ended up taking the event. At least I think they were all on Kashtira. I know at least two of them were. But yeah, Kashtira ended up taking the event, and I think it's no surprise. Things to talk about with Kashtira is like their end board is essentially an FTK. They also have plays that play around Nib a little bit. Nibiru is an amazing card versus them. Don't get me wrong, it's insane, but some players are deciding to play around it by making a Rise Heart on Summon 4, but I always think that's a little weak, because if your end goal is to just make a Rise Heart on Summon 4, there's like 18 different decks that are better than that play around Nibiru. But yeah, essentially the deck when it's going for its ceiling is just an FTK, it feels like. So really there's nothing to talk about as far as what they're playing. I have seen people go for more hand trap lines, where they'll take something like a Fenrir. Let me start utilizing the dueling book in front of me, right? Like Fenrir, one of their best cards. And then they'll play hand traps like this, where they can go into a Baronne de Fleur and sort of mitigate themselves from Nibiru. Now, there's also, and one thing that happened on the live stream that was interesting is someone was playing Reinforcements of the Army to search Crusadia Arborea, which this card is just a, searchable tuner. That was interesting. That's one of the things that sort of popped up at the event, but I don't know if that will trend as far as what happened this past weekend. Another thing, this deck was like one of the scariest things about it was Ibli, and honestly, I didn't see Ibli at all. Now, I'm sure there were definitely people there playing Ibli, but as far as like the meta trend from that event, I'm not sure if this is going to trend up or down. Like, should we still be preparing for this card? I think so. Like, some of my decks have side decked to Lingaribo just in case, so I don't get Ibli'd if my deck loses to that. A big problem with Ibli is the fact that Book of Eclipse is already so good, and then enemy controller is also good, so this card has weaknesses, but it stops Nibiru, evenly matched, a bunch of cards that give Kashtira trouble. So that's sort of how we'll have to see like what options Kashtira has going forward. Now, how to beat Kashtira, obviously I just mentioned Nibiru. You can play Book of Eclipse. These are the well-known ones, right? So, but things that were trending, or things that could start to trend, was actually Contact C. The second place team actually had Contact C in their side deck, I believe. And Contact C is interesting because once the Kashtira player uses Theosis, Theosis says, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Xyz monsters after this card resolves. So the second they use Theosis, you can give them Contact C, and this is level 6, so they can't Xyz summon with it, and their turn essentially ends wherever they use Theosis at, which is definitely pretty solid. Now, they have some lines where they don't have to use Theosis until a Rise Heart is on board, and then a Rise Heart could banish Contact C with his effect if they get there. So they have well, they have to open really, really good to get that far ahead without Theosis in a lot of situations. So Contact C is something that I think if you have a very big Kashtira problem, could be very good to maybe include in your side deck. There's other options like Lancia, Chaos Hunter's a little weird. I don't really recommend that one too much, unless you also lose very hard to D-Shifter. But yeah, that's sort of what I want to say about Kashtira. Obviously, the biggest thing about the event was the fact that Kashtira won. Now, I really want to talk about Branded, because I think Branded definitely had one of the more interesting showings as far as how the deck evolved so quickly. Like, the Branded we're sort of used to is like the lines where they go for Lubellion, and they go for like Rindbrum, and like Billy Break was on stream just hoping to see this line, and I was too, because it's one of like the cooler lines the deck has. But that's not what they were going for. How Branded essentially, outside of the cool combos the deck has, how Branded is really evolved is to go back to essentially the more floodgatey strategy. And now they are summoning this card to your board instead of something like Ra's Disciple. Now, why are they going for Gimmick Puppet Nightmare? So they use Branded Expulsion, if you're unaware. They use Branded Expulsion to summon this card from their graveyard to your field. And what Gimmick Puppet Nightmare does is once he's special summoned, he applies an effect on your turn that you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Gimmick Puppet monsters, right? So it's like, it also works like Azathoth. There's nothing you can do to like negate this effect activating, I'm pretty sure. It like sets a condition is what I want to say. So why play this over Ra's Disciple is this card floodgates your opponent similar to Scythe, but way more broken. And then you can't like Book of Eclipse your field to turn it off like Ra's Disciple. You can't enemy controller it away. There are so few outs to this, and it allows Branded to just OTK the next turn. So this card shot up in price recently, which makes sense. This card is really disgusting. It essentially means to not get hit by this and be FTK'd by Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. You either have to have a Bestial, in which they did not, to banish it to sort of dodge that interaction. You have to have Ghost Bell, potentially. Ghost Bell is a card that we could maybe see more of if Branded continues to evolve this way. Ghost Bell can counter this card, which stops this card from coming out. So that has some potential there. And yeah, like a Bestial as well. Let me just like put Magnamute, although he's not maybe the best Bestial anymore. Sarnir's seeing a lot more play because of Branded. But yeah, these are potentially options to try and stop this. This one's a little less good. But yeah, so that is something they can go for. Of course, you can always just Ash Branded Fusion, right? But another big trend for this deck and something to watch out for is the inclusion of Aqua Dolphin, which this was an insane tech by the second place team. They were running this. I don't know who else was running this. I'm sure a lot of people were actually on this. Or not a lot, but I'm sure more than just one team has figured this out, because it's not like super hard to see. Fusion Deployment is already a good card in the deck because they're able to summon Cartasia or Fallen of Albaz. The second Cartasia got released, Fusion Deployment became a lot better. And now Fusion Deployment can get, let me look, I actually don't know his name, so I'm going to type this in. I believe it's this one. Yeah, you can play this, or you can play this. There's actually, no, you can't play this. I think it's either of these two you can play. But yeah, you reveal this with Fusion Deployment, special summon Aqua Dolphin, and then use Aqua Dolphin to snipe out Ash Blossom. So Ash Blossom, you know, a card known for destroying the Branded matchup. Now you can special summon Aqua Dolphin, get rid of the Ash Blossom, and then play Branded Fusion for free. So Branded actually had some crazy evolutions this weekend. Definitely things that, you know, when we were going into the new format, I don't think a lot of people were expecting them to shift towards. But it definitely worked out for the second place team. And I think it was definitely well thought out and a well constructed deck. They definitely had good thoughts going into the YCS and made some really good like tech choices that a lot of Branded players weren't playing. So yeah, it kind of sucks because I don't like the fact that Branded might shift towards this playstyle. I felt like the deck was super cool, like compared to its old version that was just Branded in Red Turbo, and had like a bunch of different lines, but now it might just be Branded Expulsion, just Floodgate again. This deck also has a pretty serious problem against Kashtira. Like, if they go for the play that locks out all of your spell and trap card zones, that can be pretty tough. So maybe we'll definitely shift to even more Nibirus, more Lava Golems potentially, because that will sort of mitigate that problem. Like, Lava Golem is just essentially the best card against that deck. I've seen some people start playing Fog King to try to play around it for Kashtira. Just something I could have talked about before, but alright, so that's enough about Branded. Also on the second place team was Ryan Yu, piloting definitely a fan favorite of my channel. A lot of people on my channel love this deck. I love this deck because it just, you know, I picked up the deck max rarity, and I really enjoy the archetype. So we have Labyrinth. Now, Labyrinth, I don't know if it really evolved any from how people were playing it, but it definitely came more into the spotlight. So some big cards that people like to talk about was like Terror of the Overroot, but this card, okay, that needs an S. This card is solid, but it's been solid in Labyrinth for a long time. So the people talking about this card just really hadn't been introduced to the Labyrinth strategy that well, because this has been known for Labyrinth. It's pretty normal. Definitely the version that ended up becoming the most popular was the list playing Skill Drain. Skill Drain, definitely a really big card. It has outs, but one thing about Labyrinth that's really good this format is, one, it doesn't like play into a lot of the FTKs, and it can run Dimensional Barrier main decked. And this card beats the format. You think of the format, you think Branded, Kashtira, maybe Sword Soul, Sprite, you think of maybe some Runic variants. D-Barrier is solid versus all of these. And in fact, not only just solid against a big portion of the meta, it is game ending. So being able to play this is super huge for the Labyrinth deck, and I think really helps it a lot sort of do what it wants to do even better, which, like, Skill Drain's a solid floodgate, but it loses to things, and then D-Barrier really just doesn't lose to things. Now, a big way this deck has trended in the past, and it's sort of, for most Labyrinth players, I would say it was the result of, like, the weekend. That's what they were doing as well. But Ryan Yu actually decided to play a Labyrinth extra deck, which I think is really interesting. It's not something I personally would do going forward either. I think the strat is to definitely play, you know, a different deck's extra deck. So you can run Labyrinth and then just have, like, a bunch of Arise Hearts if you're in your extra deck if you have them. Like Kashtira is a solid extra deck choice. You can run Shangri-Eras, and you just build your extra deck to be, you know, Kashtira-ish, or like 99% Kashtira. The thing you can do is still try to fit like maybe one Natisse in there, and maybe choose an extra deck of a deck that plays Natisse naturally, right? Like one I was thinking about was Mikanko Libromancer. You could build a Mikanko Libromancer extra deck, which already plays Natisse because it runs Diviner. Or you could play like a Tearlament extra deck as well, and they also run Diviner sometimes, so maybe Natisse isn't a stretch. There's a lot of options you could definitely do there. And that's one thing I think a lot of Labyrinth players are shifting towards, because otherwise, Kashtira can just go for a play that locks out your zones, and that really stinks. So yeah, it's all about, this format essentially is just dodging different types of FTKs, it feels like, which kind of sucks because leaving tier limit format, I think we all wanted the meta to trend more towards like what national format was, or at least there's a lot of variety, but we wanted to leave the floodgatey sort of FTKs behind. Things like Scythe, right? Getting banned was a super big win for the community, but there's just other ways to do it, and yeah, the format looks like it's shifting more FTK style, but when that happens, usually people start playing the outs to that a lot more, and then those sort of shift to the wayside. So how this format's going to progress is really interesting. I was really surprised to not see any Plunder Patrol. I think that deck's still like a really solid rogue deck, but maybe people weren't like giving it enough time before the event. I think like Brave Plunder's good. I think the Brave engine was severely underplayed as well. Also, like Tearlaments, no Tearlaments, but I had a couple comments where people were like, maybe Tearlament really is just not that great after the ban list, and I wouldn't count Tearlament out yet. I think the deck itself is pretty strong, and it can like do a lot of cool things, and I believe Patrick Hoban actually bubbled with a Tearlament variant, so it almost topped at the YCS, which we would have been able to see and, you know, put data in that Tearlament topped, but I wouldn't count the deck out fully. The problem Tearlament really has is the format around it is tough because Tearlament has to play such a large engine, but this format, to stop all the FTKs, you really need just a bunch of flex spots, so it makes it really weird. But I wouldn't count Tearlament out yet. I think they're still a solid rogue-ish deck that can do a lot. Like, they still make really crazy end boards, but definitely not something I would say going forward you have to prepare for near as much. Like, the beginning of this format, people thought maybe Tier still going to be a threat of some sort, but I would say it's more just like a rogue option, so you don't have to prepare too much for it. Definitely like some more stuff to stop the FTKs in your side deck, like, you know, Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, Bell potentially, Back Row Destruction for Labyrinth. All these cards are like really good going forward, I think. And yeah, that's going to do it for this video for me. Just wanted to talk about YCS Vegas, sort of the things happening with it. There's definitely a lot that could be said. I could have talked about a bunch of things that happened at the YCS for like 30 minutes. I didn't go, so I wasn't there personally to tell any personal stories, but definitely just stuff from stream and what people have been talking about. It was a really interesting YCS, and a lot of things went down, and being the first event of the format, I definitely wanted to cover it to sort of see where we might go from here. But yep, that's going to be all for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.